What if I told you there's solid historical evidence that Jesus Christ really walked the earth 2,000 years ago? You don't have to take my word for it. Historians, ancient texts, and even skeptics have weighed in. And some of the evidence might surprise you. Stay tuned, because today we're diving deep into what historians say about Jesus, the proof they've uncovered, and why it still matters today. Before we dive into the evidence, let's set the stage. It's 1st century Judea, a land under Roman rule, filled with political tension and religious fervor. This is the backdrop where Jesus of Nazareth, a carpenter-turned-teacher, supposedly lived, taught, and was crucified. But how do we know this isn't just a story? Number 1, the non-Christian evidence. Let's start with the skeptics. Did you know several ancient historians who weren't Christians wrote about Jesus? Here are the heavy hitters. Tacitus. This Roman historian called Jesus Christus and wrote about his execution under Pontius Pilate. This wasn't a Christian fanboy. Tacitus despised Christians. Josephus, a Jewish historian, mentioned Jesus twice. Sure, some parts might have been edited later, but most scholars agree his core references to Jesus are authentic. Pliny the Younger and Lucian. Even letters and satirical writings point to early Christians worshiping this man who was crucified. These weren't believers, they were documenting a movement they saw as strange, maybe even threatening. Now, what about Christian writings? Sure, the Gospels are religious texts, but historians also treat them as historical documents. Here's why. They describe real historical figures like Pontius Pilate and King Herod, aligning with what we know about 1st century Judea. Then there's Paul, whose letters are some of the earliest written references to Jesus. And get this, Paul's letters were circulating just 20 years after Jesus' death. That's incredibly close in historical terms. Okay, so we've got written records, but what about the world Jesus lived in? Archaeology backs up the Gospels' descriptions of towns like Nazareth, Capernaum, and Jerusalem during his time. These weren't mythical places, they were real. Plus, think about this. Why would a tiny movement led by an ordinary man explode into a global phenomenon, with followers willing to face persecution and even death, if it wasn't rooted in something real? Now, you might be thinking, if Jesus was real, why don't we have physical proof? Good question, but here's the deal. Many ancient figures didn't leave physical traces. We don't have writings directly from Socrates either, but no one doubts he existed. So, what's the verdict? The evidence, historical records, archaeology, and the sheer persistence of his story points to Jesus being a real person who lived 2,000 years ago. Whether or not you believe in the miracles, his existence is hard to deny. And here's why it matters. Understanding the historical Jesus helps us see how one man's teachings reshaped history and continues to impact billions of lives today. Now it's your turn. What do you think about the historical evidence for Jesus? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone curious about history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.